Welcome back, everybody. We are going to begin a new unit on geometry, and we are going to be looking at the different shapes that we use in geometry. And the first shape we're going to talk about is the triangle. So you're pretty familiar with triangles. We know they have three sides and three angles. That's how it gets its name, tri meaning three, and angles, so it has three angles. And we're going to look at how we can name our triangles or identify our triangles. So triangles, like people, have a first and a last name, and they can be identified by that first name or by that last name or by both together. So we're going to look at the two different ways to identify the triangles. And the first way we can identify them is a triangle can be identified by their sides. So we can think about that like a first name. And triangles can also be identified by their angles, and that's kind of like their last name. Now, in reality, it doesn't matter which one comes first, but it's just two different names for our triangles. So when we identify triangles by their sides, we really are looking at the length of the sides and how those lengths compare to each other. So you'll notice the dash marks that go through the sides of the triangle on the part that says sides. And those marks indicate to us that anywhere you see an individual mark, anywhere else you see that mark, those sides are going to be the same length. So on an equilateral triangle, there are three dashes, a single dash through all three sides. And what that tells us is that an equilateral triangle has three equal sides. The measurements of each one of those three sides is exactly the same. Now, in the next triangle down, you'll notice that there are only two dash marks on two of the sides, and the third side doesn't have that mark. So what that tells us is that only two of the sides are the same, and the third side is different. So an isosceles triangle has two equal sides. I like to tell my students that an isosceles triangle kind of looks like an ice cream cone, and they both start with I. So if you think about ice cream cones having the two long sides and the shorter side on the top where the ice cream goes, an isosceles triangle is going to look like that. Isosceles, ice cream. They both start with I. And a scalene triangle. You'll notice on the scalene triangle that none of the sides have the same length. There are no marks on the sides to indicate equal measurement on the sides. So a scalene triangle has no equal sides. So the way I help my students remember this is by saying to them, if you were to build a house and all the walls were different sizes, what would happen to the house? And most of my students would say that it would fall over or that it would tip over or that it would lean over. And that's what a scalene triangle is like. It doesn't stand up straight anywhere. All the sides are different, so it leans over. A scalene triangle leans over because all the sides are different. All right, so we've dealt with one kind of name that we can give our triangles. Now we're going to deal with the other kind of name we can give our triangles, and that is by the measurement of the angles that make up the triangle. So there are three different kinds of angles: acute, right, and obtuse. And we've talked about those kinds of angles in the past. So you know an acute angle is less than 90 degrees. A right angle is exactly 90 degrees. And an obtuse angle is more than 90 degrees. So those angle measurements will apply to a triangle. So an acute triangle has three angles that are all less than 90 degrees, or all acute angles. Now, the interesting thing about a triangle is that all triangles have some acute angles. But what makes a triangle an acute triangle is that all three angles are acute. A right triangle is going to have one right angle or one 90-degree angle, and then also have a right or two acute angles. So you can see in this picture that the bottom left corner of the triangle is a 90-degree angle, but the other two angles are still acute. And we're going to talk about why that is here in a minute. But you need to know that a right triangle has one right angle. And the last one is an obtuse triangle. An obtuse triangle has one angle that is obtuse, which means more than 90 degrees. The other two angles are going to be acute, but one angle is obtuse. So when you're measuring the angles of a triangle, there's some important things to know, because we talked about how, all triangles have acute angles, and it just depends on that third angle whether the triangle will be acute, right, or obtuse. And a triangle can never have more than one angle that is greater than or even equal to 90 degrees, because there's a rule about the angles of a triangle. And that is that all triangles, no matter what they look like, equilateral, isosceles, scalene, right, acute, or obtuse, all triangles, when you add up the angles together, they're going to equal 180 degrees. That means that if you make a triangle and you use all the measurements of the angle and you put them together, it will make what we call a straight angle, or an angle that is exactly 180 degrees. And I want you to think about that. If I had a right triangle, that's one of those angles is 90 degrees. Well, if I had two 90-degree angles, that's already 180. So what measurement could I give to that third angle? Well, that third angle would have to be a 0-degree angle, and that doesn't work then. So that's why all triangles have to have two acute angles, and then one other angle that is another measurement, either acute, right, or obtuse. I think that will make more sense as we get practicing naming our triangles. So we're going to do an activity at the bottom of this page when you get back to class. So we won't do that until you get back. But you are going to do some practice of naming triangles. There are some videos for you to watch and then some activities for you to practice. So go ahead and check those out on Canvas. If you have any questions, be sure to message your teacher.